Antisemitism, it seems like it's in the water. Let's talk about it. Welcome to What's Jonathan Thinking? Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What's Jonathan Thinking? I am here with my good friend, Rabbi Scott Hausman-Weiss. Hi, Rabbi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. Rabbi Scott, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do in the community here in Houston.
Who am I? That's not the existential part?
Not the existential part. Just okay. In general, what's your elevator pitch?
That's funny. Well, I'm a rabbi. I'm a rabbi here in Houston, Texas. I've been a rabbi for 22 years. Was ordained in Cincinnati, Ohio, came to Birmingham, Alabama, and then Houston. And I'm the founding rabbi of a congregation called Shma Koleinu.
I have a very big place in my heart for Congregation Shma Koleinu. So we are here to talk about probably one of the more somber holidays in the Jewish calendar year. We're here to talk about a holiday called Yom Hashoah. Can you tell us a little bit about what Yom Hashoah is and why are we still commemorating it all these years?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There's a joke about Jewish holidays. You probably heard it before. They say they can all be summed up in one simple way, right? They tried to kill us. We won. Let's eat, right? Which feels good when you're talking about Hanukkah and Purim, holidays that commemorate almost destructions against the Jewish people from thousands of years ago. But Yom Hashoah, which is our Holocaust Remembrance Day, it's not funny, right? I mean, people have tried to make fun of it in different ways. People have tried to, make light of it in different ways. But at the end of the day, it's really, maybe we're too close to it. It's not that long ago.
No.
There are still, I know they're dying more and more, but there are still survivors who literally witnessed, the destruction of 6 million Jews. So I think that for that matter right there, that's why we're still commemorating Yom Hashoah. Not because it makes us happy. It's not like the other holidays, maybe because of distance and time. But it is because one of the classic answers is we need to remember.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like there is this kind of, we are coming into, I think, the darker part of the Jewish calendar, right? It's not just Yom Hashoah. We will have Pesach, but then, of course, Yom HaZikaron, Yom Yerushalayim. It's just kind of this rift of, or raft of holidays that are on the darker side of topics. But Yom Hashoah, I think, still, it just feels all too relevant. And as we've been talking, like anti-Semitism, it just seems like it's in the water. And
it very much feels that way. It's really, anti-Semitism is an incredible example of irrational hatred. Mm-hmm. Its ability to maintain itself feels irrational, right? Why is it that whether we are incredibly wealthy or incredibly poor, right? Whether we Jews have a homeland or we don't have a homeland, whether we are bankers or we are farmers, it hasn't seemed to matter. Jew hatred just perpetuates.
Correct, and I think Yom Hashoah feels more relevant this year than perhaps for me in years past, just because it does feel like there's this there are far too many recent examples of anti-Semitic events, whether it's Kanye West and Joe Rogan or I think what has been viscerally impacted the Jewish community here in Texas, which is Colleyville.
Right. Colleyville is such a horrific example of an anti-Semitic incident. That, of course, what happened was a year ago, January, a Pakistani man from England, or a Pakistani English man, did the most irrational thing you could possibly imagine. He flew from Heathrow to Dallas, DFW, and he got in a cab and he went to a synagogue that was near a prison where a woman was being held prisoner because she was found guilty for opening fire on an airbase in Afghanistan. And so, amazingly, he believed that if he came to the United States, and not if he went to a police or a military,
or a politician,
right, exactly,
the governor,
right. What did he do? He went to the synagogue closest to the prison, so that he could get the rabbi at gunpoint to force somebody to release this woman from prison. And it sounds so, dare I say, crazy. Yet this man couldn't have come to that conclusion without having been raised with this belief that Jews are actually in control of the world.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like, I feel like part of our response was like, it's crazy, but it was only a matter of time.
It's actually rational if you believe these lies, which have been perpetuated for literally hundreds and thousands of years, right?
And certainly, one of the things that was a direct response from Koleinu was, I think we all around the country heightened our security stance as a community. But it feels like that can't just be the only answer, right? Like is it just about, just beef up security and we're good? Or
it's such a great question. I cannot say that the bottom line answer is to beef up security, right? I mean, Secret Service who protect the president know that they're not 100%, right? It doesn't matter how much security you have. If somebody is absolutely dead set at causing damage, causing harm, if they're committed,
they're going to be successful.
Right? Or they might be semi-successful, or they might be able to get past, 1, 2, 3 layers. Who knows? But I also don't want to suggest that beefing up security isn't a crucial piece.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is, look, Colleyville wouldn't have helped, right? Because the guy came to the door and pretended that he was in need and, frankly, worked upon the sensitivities, right, of the Jewish leaders in the building whom he believed would take pity on him, thinking that he really needed help. Of course, that's what got him in trouble, right, is that they let him in and then he took out a gun. But there was that horrible tragedy that took place in Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh, at Tree of Life Synagogue. And I am never going to be one who blames victims.
Right.
And had that front door to the synagogue been locked, had there been a security guard with a gun whose job was to only let people in who were allowed in, who had a panic button, who had different tools to make it so that if somebody even did get past him, there would have been some kind of security protocol in place. That tragedy doesn't happen.
So that spawns a question that's actually not on our list, so what do you do within your community if somebody wants to come and worship? Right? You don't, that could be a stranger. I feel like it's lifted it's caused us to distrust strangers more than ever before. I remember even in our synagogue, somebody came in unannounced, wearing a backpack, right. and was let in, and we're like, wait, and it ended up being innocuous as totally, it was just somebody wanted to worship with us.
Right.
So it's I feel like it's caused us to not know who's friend or foe anymore, and that's the.
Yes. Right? I mean, I don't have a better answer. I know that there's definitely education that needs to take place in terms of sensitizing congregants, leadership, to help them understand what they should pay attention to and what they shouldn't. But I also believe in the really great importance of having armed security, right? And that piece, I know people don't like that idea, right? But it's a reality, right? That I think we need to take seriously, because as the title of the podcast, right? It's in the water, right? There's a lot we can do, and we do live in what feels to be a safer situation in general. It's certainly safer living in this world than living in Nazi Germany under the despot Khmelnytsky, living in the Pale of Settlement in Russia. I mean, certainly this is better than that. It's a low bar, but it's better, right? I'm okay with Jews feeling a bit more uncomfortable if it saves people's lives, right? And that's the piece that I think we don't want to admit, that anti-Semitism is still here. And I'm not suggesting that everybody's harboring it and they're all secretly planning, with pitchforks, right, ready to attack the Jews. Like that's not at all what I believe. But we have too many examples that it's just here. And so we have to be watchful for it. Mm-hmm. We have to recognize that it's possible.
Yeah. There are some positive things that I am seeing. I see you do it all the time, and I think it is enormously helpful, and that is the work that you do in creating interfaith dialogues. Can you share with us some of the things that you've, very decidedly or intentionally done in your community?
I'm very blessed to be a part of a clergy community, both a Jewish clergy community and an interfaith clergy community in Houston that does a lot of dialogue, does a lot of meetings and conversations. With regard to the interfaith piece, years ago I was involved in a retreat with Muslim, Christian, Jewish clergy, and we, dialogued and we connected, and then but it wasn't just about that weekend. We, to this day, this is 5 years later, there's a text group of us, and we often there are breakfasts. We'll get together once a month, but then it'll be a few months, and then we're like, oh, we got to get back together, right? And so then we'll get back together, and we'll have conversations that are as light as talking about our children and as heavy as talking about anti-Semitism or anti-Muslim issues or, frankly, anti-Christian stuff, right? I mean, it's all of that comes up. But the key piece that is so important, I'd love to just show you my text chain that's years old, right? We know each other, right? We're connected to each other. We care about each other. I've had difficult conversations, especially with the evangelical members of this group, where I'll say, all right, I hear you love me, but I also know you want to convert me, right? And they'll say, yeah, I would. But since I can't get that, at least I'm going to love you, right? Yeah. I mean, but we can have that dialogue, and it is so crucial. And what happens then is what makes it so valuable is that when a horrific incident occurs at a church or at a mosque or at a synagogue, we hear from each other.
I think that's the most important thing, because, I think what happens when like a Kanye speaks or Joe Rogan or anyone else who's kind of has that kind of public forum, and they spout these tropes and this anti-Semitic banter, and it just makes us kind of go insular. Like, it makes you just kind of want to fold into your home and never go out. And the worst thing that can happen from that is that we stop talking to each other. Right. I think in general, bad things happen when people stop the dialogue.
There was that whole news issue that came up after Kanye about, and they were really giving Adidas, I think. They were giving Adidas a really hard time for how long they took, right, to kick him off. Is that right? Isn't it Adidas, I think it is?
Yeah, I think it was.
I think it was Adidas. And I was watching this with such, I don't know, I was laughing a little bit. Because I'm thinking, I think it was like less than 2 weeks. And I'm thinking, I don't have a problem with this.
Yeah.
The fact that they did it, and the fact that they did it because he was so blatantly anti-Semitic. I don't care if the CEO did or didn't come to it by his own recognition. I don't care if they held him over a barrel, his board, forcing him to do it. I don't care. Right. What I care about is that it happened. Yeah. Right?
And not bad for a German company, by the way.
Very true. Very true, right? So, I think we shouldn't just call out all of the moments of anti-Semitism, right? But we should also acknowledge this is uniquely different than history, right? I mean, most of us are still buying Bayer aspirin. Bayer was one of the worst supporters of the Nazi government, right? So it's really complicated.
It's funny, I've had this inner dialogue with myself about how far do you take things? I remember, it was like a shanda to buy a German car for a while, right? Yeah, sure. You don't bring a German car, especially if you're going to go home to your parents, right? But then you do the research and you see there are a host of companies, Volkswagen, that really came to terms with their Nazi past, and there's others who kind of haven't really acknowledged it yet. And it's how far do you boycott products, right? But then there are some instances where it's okay, they really, that really we should take a moment before we buy or participate in their revenue generation.
Yeah, I don't even know what the right answer is. I don't know if you're not supposed to buy Bayer or you are. I don't know. Yeah. The people who were involved in it 60, 70, 80 years ago, they're long gone.
Yeah,
I mean, but what's fascinating, how many people know that, and I'm going to probably get the exact numbers wrong, but I'm going to get the ballpark correct. I think it was about 1955. Germany had already been sending significant reparation dollars to the state of Israel. Mm-hmm. In 1955, German reparations to the state of Israel represented 75% of the state income for the state of Israel. So, is there ever enough money to make up for
6 million?
No.
Yeah,
no, but it isn't.
It's symbolic.
Nothing.
Right,
it matters a lot, especially because they were supporting one of the pieces of modern Judaism that is one of the most significant stalwarts against there being another Holocaust.
Yeah. Well, and at least to me, and I know we're so off topic, but
no, we're totally off topic.
There were never reparations for IBM, who made significant money from the Nazi government, in the purchase of their AS400. I guess it was early generation mainframe computers, because the Germans thought they were doing something right, so they recorded everything.
Exactly.
And they needed computers to do
it.
So IBM was more than happy to sell them computers.
So along those notes, I'll get us back on track. That's precisely, those kind of things are precisely why I think Yom Hashoah matters. Not that we just stay in this dark and depressed place. Look, I'm not against being dark and depressed. I totally appreciate that. It matters to feel it. But more importantly, or at least as important as having those moments, I want people to recognize anti-Semitism when it happens. Not as hatred, not as intolerance, but as anti-Semitism. And I want to give you two examples. One, going back to Colleyville. The man who came to the synagogue believing that that is where he would be able to get this woman released from prison doesn't happen. That narrative doesn't happen without the Protocols for the Elders of Zion, which was a book that was published in the end of the 19th century in Russia that purported to be the recordings of Jews having their yearly meetings or their monthly meetings at which they determined how they would control the world, right?
Yeah.
And it was a false thing from the beginning, but I mean, the great irony, the Jews couldn't have been poorer in Russia at the end of the 19th century. We couldn't have been less powerful.
Our most popular play is about being poor in Russia.
Right, exactly, right? So there's that's one example. And the other example is, we all remember Pizzagate, right? Pizzagate is this crazy story about how Democrats were kidnapping Christian children and killing them in the basement of a pizzeria in D.C. And somehow Hillary Clinton was involved as I don't even know. But that story doesn't have any weight without the blood libel.
Right.
Right? The blood libel was
you need that trope. You need that foundational basis.
Right. The blood libel.
Right.
To be quick, is a medieval tale, a fable, taken to horrible extremes, in which Christian people were accused of. Jewish people were accused of kidnapping Christian children and using their blood to make matzah during Passover.
Right. Which doesn't go well in pizza. Really. I mean, it's just not a thing.
All right, if you can make the joke good, it's fine. But I want people to not just remember, oh, how horrible it was for us Jews during the Holocaust. It was horrible. And the horrible doesn't even begin to capture. I want people to see Pizzagate and go, oh, that's a trope that's 1,000 years old. I want people to see the Colleyville incident and go, oh, that's 120 years old. And really goes beyond farther than that. I want people to recognize that these are tropes that have been played out over and over again, because I think that is the way. I don't think we can end anti-Semitism, but I think we can blunt it if we know it's real. It's rooted in something that's fake, but still real, right? And we see it for what it is.
So I think that helps us talk about another topic, which is education, the role that education has in anti-Semitism. You mentioned, being able to call it out. Are there other things at a community level that you are doing or you would like to see happen on a broader scale?
I think the experiential piece of hearing stories from survivors, of understanding, as I talked about these tropes, are crucial. Obviously, you have to do it in age-appropriate ways. So you can't just,
bunch of people died.
Right. You just can't, exactly. Right. Having these interfaith clergy groups is fascinating at times, because all of us can share stories where we are talking with Christian leaders, for example, and they're looking at us sort of quizzically when we're talking about our security budget. We don't have a security budget. What do you mean? Now, it's not that there haven't been horrific things that have happened to churches, right? But they're just not perceived.
Not the frequency.
Yeah, it's not the. I don't know if it's the. I don't know if it's the frequency or if it's the historical weight, right? When I think when a church has a shooting, it can generally be written off to just it's a crazy person.
Right.
You know, not that any death or any loss like that is something that you can just pretend is not important. But when Jews are hit in a synagogue, and when Muslims are hit in a mosque, it speaks to really recent, really modern, still heavy and disturbing elements in our histories and our stories. So there isn't an anti-Semitic incident that doesn't come with 18 layers of examples of how things have been like this in the past, how it's a repeat. Here it is again, right? And I think it's different for Jews and
Muslims.
I
think it seems very different. Like if an incident happens at a church, as you say, its odds are it is not because of some latent hatred,
right,
about Christianity or Catholicism or whatever kind of church that it's happening in. Like it is far easier or I think far more expected that event happened because somebody just, their brain went a different way,
right,
and caused them to do this. Versus, I think it's generally safe assuming that if somebody attacks a temple or a synagogue, that it's crazy and they were tapping into some anti-Semitism
right,
that they were taught or they learned and caused them to feel that was the most appropriate action to take.
right. Well, that's the example of the Tree of Life synagogue, right? Because why did that guy do that? The story is that he believed that Jews were involved in smuggling in immigrants who illegally, right, in order to take over or replace white people in America, right? That's the story
That we're going to do with 1% of the population. But okay.
Right, exactly. No, we're going to grow our numbers by bringing in these immigrants.
So
right?
next year it'll be 2%.
Right, exactly,
okay.
Exactly, right.
The math totally holds up.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what do we Jews push? What is a great part of our Jewish American heritage, right? We believe in what we call tikkun olam, repairing the world. And who are the people who would need to be helped? Well, some of them are immigrants. Sorry, some of them are people who are poor, who are abused, who are neglected, people who are in great need. And oftentimes, people who are in great need as a result of.
Yeah, I mean, we have an enormously amazing organization called Jewish Family Services.
Right.
That more often than not is helping families, not necessarily Jewish families, but is there for the community as a service to the community. Like it's not always.
Right. Well, you think about American Jewish World Service, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, the Religious Action Center. I mean, we tend to be on the side of the little guy.
Yeah.
Right? We always tend to be on the side of the underdog.
Which, coming back to Yom Hashoah, is probably why we must take this moment to think about this holiday, because that is who we are. We stand up for the oppressed. It's in our theology.
Right. It's in the Torah
We're actually
itself.
studying it right now.
Right. We are literally right now in the book of Parshat Yitro, the book of Exodus. And we will hear by the end of the Torah, by the end of reading all 5 books, we will have heard 36 different times, right? More often, I mean, it's funny. People assume that the keeping kosher is like maybe the most common law that's repeated in the Torah.
No, it's
but
twice.
the most common, yeah, exactly. The most common one is, "You shall not oppress a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." Right? This is who we are. right? And it has put us on the short end of the stick against powerful entities. But not because we're wicked and seeking to undermine society, but because we believe this.
Right.
We were strangers, we were slaves, therefore those people should not be. And we should
Well, and I
seek
think
to help them.
because of what Yom HaShoah is commemorating, we are enormously sensitive when we see the same thing
Yes.
happening in the world to
Right.
somebody else.
Right, exactly.
And I think that makes this holiday not just about us, but about looking at, are there other Shoahs? Are there other oppressed people that should be in our hearts, that should be in our actions, that we should be doing something about?
Well, I think
so
that's the
important.
demand, right? I think it's the demand of the Torah. I think it's the demand of remembering that we were slaves in Egypt, right? That's one of the fundamental demands of what it means to be Jewish. So if you are anti-Semitic, and I want you to know that you're wrong, that there is nothing inherently evil in me, or maybe I'm as potentially evil as you are. I'm as potentially good as you are as well. Anti-Semitism is not worth the effort. You'll be much happier if you just take time to get to know me and recognize I'm a human being and so are you.
I think good things always happen when we just take the time to get to know someone, because then they're human.
Right?
When somebody's human, it's really hard to hate them. This question came from a college student friend of mine, very active in Hillel at his university, which, for those of you who don't know, Hillel is a nationwide organization that creates communities for college kids to continue to commune and worship while they're away from home, often at college. So, and his question was, how do we continue to preserve who we are and our culture, our rituals, in this world where it's feeling like this rise of anti-Semitism?
I think the question is, can we? Right? Can we pursue an expression of Jewish identity in a world that feels scarier to be Jews publicly? Right? And I mean, I think the answer is yes. But I think I go back to my trope that we need to be smart. We need to be educated. Now, not just about the real sources and examples of things that get replayed, right, anti-Semitically. But we need to remind ourselves of the incredible value, like the incredible depth and wisdom of Jewish tradition. That there is so much within Jewish wisdom that helps us become better human beings, that challenges us to be more fair, to be more humble, to be more sensitive and recognize others. The downside, one of the many downsides of anti-Semitism is that the defensive posture to anti-Semitism can be isolating, right? We can close ourselves off, believe that nobody else will understand us, and we're just going to close in. And then that self-perpetuating story of no one understands us, therefore we won't have relationships with them, which then makes us stranger, which then creates more stories on their part, right? It's back and forth, right? We have to be cognizant of, we have to grow in our knowledge and our wisdom of our tradition. So it's not just about focusing on how they hate us. Like, I want people to understand these are real tropes that matter,
right,
that we have to pay attention to, we have to be sensitive to. But that's not enough. Like, negative identity isn't enough, right? We also have to have reasons why we pursue Judaism, right? Why it's a fantastic religious, spiritual experience, right? Why it matters, why it's important, and why it makes the best points of our lives better and the worst points of our lives more tolerable.
For sure. I think you have it here in Houston, but an annual kosher chili cook-off.
Yes.
So we obviously have ours in Dallas, and I mean, it's a wonderful time. I can't think of another event where the entire Jewish community comes out. And it doesn't matter whether you're Reform, conservative, Orthodox.
Right.
It's about coming together as a community. And I think the challenge with events like Colleyville and other, is it makes you think twice. Like, do I go to the kosher chili kickoff, which is going to have rides and food and friends and and we should go, because if we don't go, then we ruin the reason to have it year upon year. But it is difficult to not have that moment of like, is it safe?
Yeah. Right. And that's why leadership in the community needs to be clear to say, we recognize that we have a problem and we're taking it seriously. And we're going to make sure that the Jews in the Jewish community understand that we're taking it seriously. And we want the broader community to understand we're taking this seriously so that we're not such sitting ducks, right? So people can feel like, I would rather live in a world in which Jews are a bit more worried about anti-Semitism such that they make sure their institutions take it seriously.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the piece that I think we lull ourselves into, this sense of safety, right, that wasn't true and isn't true.
Right.
At least not on a
So
whole
you
scale.
maintain that security profile, but you still push through and you say, this is important.
Right.
We're having it.
Right.
We're just going to make sure it's safe for everyone involved.
And remain willing to say, we do this because anti-Semitism is real. It is not something, it's not something we're using as a crutch. We would be thrilled to end this effort, right?
Yeah, we even end our Shabbat services with turning to our security officer saying, we pray for the moment where you are a congregant and not needed.
Exactly. Right.
But we're not there yet.
Right.
So we continue to pray. I guess wrapping up, where do you feel we go from here?
I think it's a reiteration of what I've said. I think that we need to do a better job of identifying, of educating people to recognize what anti-Semitism looks like. To call it out. To build protections so that we are not as susceptible. To take it seriously. And we need to dive in more to our Jewish experience, our Jewish education, our Jewish involvement, our Jewish connection, so that the sacrifices we have to make matter. We're reminded of why we do this, right? What is the value added to my life because I'm Jewish? Right? Which is a question that we don't generally ask. Because if we're born Jewish, you're just Jewish. Yeah. But this is the world we live in now.
Yeah, and I guess what motivates me is I'm not going to stop acknowledging that anti-Semitism is. It is. But I don't want to give it so much power that it stops me from doing the things that I am deeply interested in. Helping the underserved, being a voice for change and positivity, and being proud of who I am, and feeling so and using that pride to ensure that it carries forward to another generation. That to me is too important to let anti-Semitism get in the way.
Right.
So. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to work with you and your community. The once or twice a month that I get to.
And they love you. We love you.
I guess it seems appropriate to end with a prayer that one day we can sit and talk about anti-Semitism in the past tense and talk about something more fun.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jonathan.